Hi everyone, and thank you for joining April 2021's Stampin' Class by Mail. My name is Gina Wieselman of MySweetPaper.com, and I can't wait for you to stamp and assemble your cards using the Hydrangea Hill Suite by Stampin' Up. I've teamed up with Brenda Cardinal, another Stampin' Up demonstrator, to offer these monthly classes by mail. This month, Brenda will show you how to stamp and assemble your cards, and next month, it'll be my turn. Make sure to watch to the end of this video for a sneak peek of my card designs and for a few bonus opportunities. Have fun making your cards, and here's Brenda.
Thanks, Gina. Hi, everyone. I'm Brenda Cardinal of stampintulip.stampinup.net, and I'm excited to show you how to stamp and assemble your 3 card designs featuring the Hydrangea Hill Suite by Stampin' Up. This suite can be found in the January to June 2021 mini catalog. From the Hydrangea Hill Suite, we'll be using the Hydrangea Haven stamp set and the Hydrangea dies. Also from the suite, we'll be using the Hydrangea Hill Designer Series paper, the Hydrangea Hill Mercury Glass Designer Acetate, the Gorgeous Grape 3/8" sheer ribbon, and the pastel pearls. We'll also be using some elements that have been pre-cut and punched for you if you ordered a class kit from either Gina or me. These elements include things from the banner triple punch, the layering ovals dies, and the stitched shapes dies. Before we get started, you'll want to get your supplies ready, including the Highland Heather, Mossy Meadow, and Tuxedo Black Memento ink pads, mini glue dots, mini Stampin' Dimensionals, Stampin' Dimensionals, Stampin' Seal, multi-purpose liquid glue, tear and tape adhesive, a bone folder, an assortment of clear blocks, paper snips, and Stamparatus. Please reach out to Gina or me if you need any supplies, would like to chat about becoming a Stampin' Up demonstrator, or hosting a Stampin' Up event. Let's get started with our first card design. Our first card design is the Highland Heather Hydrangea. If you ordered a Stampin' Class by Mail kit from either Gina or me, all your parts and pieces, including those that have been die cut or punched, were shipped directly to your home. If not, here are the things you'll need to complete the cards as designed. Please pause the video here to prep everything, and then come back when you're ready. We'll start by doing our stamping. We'll stamp our hydrangea first, and we'll stamp that on our 4 1/4 by 2 3/4" basic white piece. And we'll be using our Memento Tuxedo Black ink. When working with a larger stamp, I like to lay my block on my work surface and then work my stamp pad around my stamp to make sure it's completely inked up. Now for placement for this, you want to put it a little lower on the cardstock, because if you'll notice here, the fill-in stamp is a little larger than our outline image. Put some nice pressure on that. Next, we'll stamp the fill-in image for our leaves, and we'll use Mossy Meadow ink for that. So the fill-in images for this particular stamp set are not exact. They're designed that way. So they will have a little bleed beyond our outline image. And then we'll fill in our hydrangea using the Highland Heather ink. Now this one is truly not exactly the same. So you can, play with it to see which way you want to stamp this particular image. As you can see, the fill-in stamp actually has some lights and darks already in it. But to add a little bit more dimension, we're going to come back with this little petal stamp, and we're just going to randomly stamp some of the full image petals just to create a little more dimension. And you can pick and choose how much you want to do and how much you want to leave. All right, we'll set that aside. And then we'll stamp our greeting on this little label that was die cut with the hydrangea dies. Now, for perfect placement, you can use your Stamparatus, and we did include the relief of the die cut image. I think I'm going to be okay stamping this without my Stamparatus, but I will show you how to use a Stamparatus on one of the other cards. Yeah, that worked out great. We'll set that aside. And then if you want, you can stamp one of our flower sprays on one of the 5 1/4 by 4 inch basic white pieces. And you could also stamp that same image on your envelope if you'd like. All right, that's all of our stamping. Let's start assembling. We'll start by folding our Highland Heather card base in half, and we'll use our bone folder to get a nice crease on that. Then we'll add our stamped 5 1/4 by 4 inch basic white piece with some Stampin' Seal. And we'll put that on the inside of our card base. Then we'll bring in our second piece of basic white 5 1/4 by 4 inch piece and our designer series paper, and we'll add that to the left side of our basic white piece. And if there's any extra, you can trim that off. When possible, I like to cut my designer series paper a little bit bigger than the piece it's going to be attached to, so that it is not short, right? Because I didn't want any white showing on my card. It looks like I maybe got that a little crooked, so you know what? I'm going to come back. Looks like I need to trim just a little bit more here. And I'm going to come back and just nip off that one corner. There we go. Okay, and then we'll add this to the front of our card base. Set that aside, and then we'll add our hydrangea to our last piece of Highland Heather cardstock. Okay, so now we want to add our ribbon, and a pencil might be handy here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay my hydrangea on my card front, and I'm going to lay it so that it's approximately 3/4 of an inch from the fold edge to the Highland Heather layer. And I'm going to take my pencil, and I have it centered so that I have equal borders at the top and bottom. And I'm going to draw a line, just a light pencil line, make sure it's straight. And I'm going to go from a 1/2 inch from the top to about a 1/2 inch from the bottom. Okay, and I'm going to use that as my placement for my tear and tape adhesive. So I'm going to take my tear and tape adhesive, and I'm going to place it along the right side of that line. Put a little pressure on it so it sticks, and then I'm going to tear off the release tape, and then I'm going to add the ribbon. So how I did this is I started out by putting a little loop at the top, and I laid it on my tear and tape. And then I just kept making loops all the way down. And I think don't be too worried about whether it's exactly equal all the way down, because I think it looks nice if it's more random. So I'm going to double check and make sure I like the way it looks. And it looks like I would like to have it go, see how I have like a little like 1/4 inch space up here and more like a 1/2 inch down here. So I think I'm going to try it again. And that's the beauty with this tear and tape and ribbon. You can kind of play with it a little bit. So I think what I need to do is I need to start this one down a little lower. And I'll try it again. Okay, let's check it and see what we think. Yeah, I think I like that better. Okay, so I'm gonna I have excess here, so I'm gonna bring in my paper snips that I have designated for my ribbon. I cut off the excess, and then I'm gonna attach our hydrangea piece to the card front, and we're gonna do that using Stampin' Dimensionals. So we'll peel off those papers, and I'm gonna put it so that I just have a little bit of the ribbon peeking out, and I want it so that I have the same border at the top and the bottom. All right, there we go. Then we'll add our greeting, and we're going to use mini Stampin' Dimensionals to do that. And we'll place this towards the bottom and to the right. And then lastly, we're going to add our gorgeous grape pearls. And there we go. Our next card is the Misty Moonlight Hydrangea. And here are the parts and pieces you'll need for this card. We'll start by doing our stamping, and we'll stamp our flower spray first. If you ordered a kit from Gina or me, this piece has already been die cut for you. And I think we could probably get pretty close to stamping that centered, but I said I'd show you how to use the Stamparatus, so let me get that out and show you how that works. So our setup today is our base, our plate, our foam pad. This makes up the difference from our rubber stamps because the photopolymer does not have the foam, and then our grid paper. So we'll take our stamp off of the block, and for easier inking of that stamp, we'll prop the plate up here with a stamp case, and it just makes it more level. And then we'll ink our stamp with a Memento Tuxedo Black. Then we'll stamp it on our grid paper. Oh, it looks like I missed a little bit there. Let's ink that up again, just be easier. When we go to place our relief cardstock around our stamped image. Then we'll drop our die cut piece back into the relief. We'll ink our stamp again. Close the panel, put a little pressure on that. Oh, it looks like I missed the center there a little bit. So because we're using the Stamparatus, I can just ink it again. Close the panel. And look at that. Perfect placement. So now we want to stamp our greeting. We'll use Highland Heather ink for that. And we'll stamp it on our basic white stitched oval. And we'll place that so it's over to the right and a little below the center horizontal line. Okay. I should mention that the stitched shapes dies are retiring. as well as the layering oval dies. So if you don't have them already, you might want to think about grabbing those. You could also stamp your envelope with that same spray and your Highland Heather ink if you'd like. All right, so now we want to color our little flower spray. And to do that today, we're going to be using a blender pen. And to create our color palette, we're going to take a clear block, we're going to press it into the pad, transfer some of that ink, and that is how we'll grab the ink to color our flowers. Now, blender pens are kind of cool because when you pick up the ink the first time, it's quite intense, right? But as you color with it, it kind of bleeds out, so you get a lighter shade. So it creates some nice dimension for you kind of automatically. And you can go back over some flowers if you want to create, a little bit more, a deeper shade, you can play with that some. All right, now before we switch colors to do our leaves, I'm going to scribble on a piece of scratch paper here until my blender pen bleeds dry. And then for our leaves, we'll be using the Mossy Meadow ink. And those petals are pretty tiny, so I'm just going to grab another clear block here and just grab a little tiny bit of color. All right, there we go. And then before I put my blender pen away, I'm going to scribble again and get all the Mossy Meadow out of there. And then it'll be ready to go for next time. And then we're going to grab our Misty Moonlight card base, and we're going to fold that along the score line there. And to get a nice crease, we'll crease it with our bone folder. And we'll set that aside for a minute, and then we'll start assembling our cards. So with our Stampin' Seal, we'll start by assembling our larger piece of Hydrangea Hill Designer Series paper to one of the larger pieces of basic white cardstock. And we'll center that. Then we'll add our smaller piece of Designer Series paper to our smaller piece of basic white cardstock, and we'll center that. I probably should have mentioned that you do get two basic white pieces of cardstock that are exactly the same size, so it doesn't matter which one you grab to adhere your Designer Series paper to. Then we'll take the larger Designer Series paper assembly, and we'll add that to the front flap of our card, again centering. Then we'll take the smaller Designer Series paper assembly, and with that flap closed, we're going to place this one to the right of that first one, and I'm eyeballing it because I like my basic white pieces to line up straight across on my card. Oops, got that one going a little crooked there. Okay, and then the second piece of basic white cardstock we'll add to the inside of our card. And we'll place this so that, again, the basic white pieces are lining up straight across, and whatever this border is, I kind of want that border to be the same. Okay, there we go. And then we're going to add our stamped oval onto our Misty Moonlight oval. Get that ready to go. Oop, I didn't get that centered to how I'd like it. Let's try that again. It's kind of nice if you don't put a lot of pressure on your pieces when you're using Stampin' Seal, then you can pick them up and place them again. So yeah, I think that looks better. Okay, there we go. So then I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to run a piece of Stampin' Seal through the center. And then I'm going to add our acetate. So a couple things about the acetate. The first one is that the ends were punched with the Banner triple punch. And again, I love this punch, and I'm sorry that it's retiring, but I like it because it's like 3 punches in one, right? So it had 1 inch, I think this is 1.5 and 2-inch strips that you can put in there to create banners. Then acetate comes with a film on the back side, and you want to pull that off before you put it on your card. And I like to use my take your pick tool to grab it and pull it off. If you forget and you leave it on, it's okay. It just is a little brighter with it off, if you will. Okay, so then I'm going to close my flap. I'm going to place my acetate on my card, and I'm centering it between the Designer Series paper layers. And then I'm going to pick up my greeting, and I'm going to place it so it's over to the right, and approximately I have a 3/4 of an inch showing on this side, and that's from the point here to where it kind of meets. And I think, you know what, I think I'm going to move it over just a little bit more to the left. Yeah, there we go. And I'm trying to place it so that it's centered through my oval. Okay, there we go. Now to attach this, we're going to take our dimensionals, and we're going to place one on the flap. And notice we're going to have the border at the top here is going to be a little wider than the border at the bottom. So if I visualize a horizontal line, I'm putting my dimensional below that. And then I don't want to seal my card closed with dimensional, so I'm going to put one on this side. So on the acetate, but also not beyond where the oval is. All right, then I'll pull the papers, and I'll place that on the front of my card. Okay, there we go. Then we'll add the flower spray, and to do that we'll use mini dimensionals. Now placement here, I'm going to put them so it's on the longer edge because the top is going to hang off. Okay, so let's put, I think we probably can get away with 2, and maybe I'll throw 1 on my Misty Moonlight oval. And we'll grab those papers. And we'll place that off to the left side. All right. And then our last thing is to add our Highland Heather pearls. We're going to put 1 here. So I'm placing it so that it's between where the banner is at its shortest and the Misty Moonlight oval. And then I'll place kind of that same distance, whatever this distance is, I'll place it here on the other side, and then I'll add that second pearl, kind of dividing the space between the pearl and my Misty Moonlight oval. So there we go. Our last card is our Rococo Rose Hydrangea. And here are the parts and pieces you'll need for this card. So I did want to mention before we get started that the Rococo Rose is one of our retiring in colors. So if you love it, you want to get it before it's gone. All right, and then the other thing I want to talk about is how I cut the cardstock for this card. It's kind of clever. This is one of our fun fold cards. So let me show you how we end up getting the card base, the piece here, and our backing for our focal point. So we start out by cutting our 8.5 by 11 inch piece of cardstock in half. So it ends up being 4 1/4 by 11. Then with our paper cutter, we'll score our card in half. So half of 11 is 5.5. And our scoring blade is the lighter gray one. Go over that a couple times. Then we're going to slide our cardstock to the left, and we're going to align that score line with 1 1/4 inch. So here's our 1 inch line, and each of these vertical lines are 1/4 inch. So we'll line that up, and then with our cutting blade, we'll cut that off. Okay. Then we'll move our cardstock over to that 1 1/4 inch line, and we'll cut that off, and there are 3 pieces. So it's a pretty economical fun fold, because what we would consider maybe the waste is actually used to put our whole card together. Stamping is pretty simple on this card. We have our "For You" on our tag. The tag has been cut for you with the hydrangea dies, and our ink is Mossy Meadow. So we'll stamp that right on our tag. Okay. And then if you'd like to have a greeting on the inside of your card, you can stamp it on the 5 1/4 by 4 inch basic white piece. Now, placement for your greeting is kind of important, because we have this open space on either side of our focal point. So in my sample here, I have it placed right in the middle, which is great because you can't see it. However, if you need a good reminder to not write your message beyond what will be covered with our focal point, you can move it over to the left a little bit, like that. Okay. All right, and that's all of our stamping. We'll start by folding our card base and crease it along the score line. And we'll set that aside for a second. And then we'll add our very narrow 4 inch by 1/2 inch pieces of designer series paper to our inside piece. When I place these, I'm going to place them so I have about, I don't know, just a little, maybe 1/16 of an inch of the basic white showing, both at the top and the bottom. And then if you have any excess, go ahead and trim that off. And then we'll add this to the inside of our Rococo Rose card base. I'm looking for equal borders all the way around. All right. Next, we'll add our 1 inch by 4 inch pieces of designer series paper to the flap of our card base. Again, looking for equal borders. And then to that piece that we cut off, we'll add our designer series paper. Again, equal borders. Okay. And lastly, we'll add our basic white piece here to our Rococo Rose piece. All right. Our next step then is to bridge the loose piece to our card base. And I believe this fun fold is called a bridge card because we have a piece that bridges between the top and the bottom layer. So we're going to use dimensionals to create that bridge, and we want to put one dimensional in each of the 4 corners and kind of close to the edges. Okay. So I'm going to pull the papers off the dimensionals, and then I'm going to double check everything. So I'm going to line up this piece so it's exactly lined up with the card base, and I'll fold Oops, I just moved it. I'll fold the flap down, and then I'll place the bridge to the left. So I want to make sure that this bridge piece is centered, top and bottom. All right. Now, if you'd rather have this centered, if having it off to the left bothers you, you could certainly center it. But there we go. Okay. And then we want to start adding our hydrangea. So to do that, we'll use our multi-purpose liquid glue. And we want to be careful with this, right? Because we don't want to get too much. And this is a very fine die cut piece. And then to attach our hydrangea, we'll use mini glue dots. Now, this die cut is really cool. You could, if you wanted to create a little bit more dimension, pop up some of the petals. Just put a little, it's not really a fold, but just a little bend to them to create some extra dimension. You can see here I didn't do that, and it's still beautiful because the die cut petals also pop just by themselves. But let's do this and just see what this looks like. All right, so we just have a few of them popped up. So when you place your mini dimensionals, you want to place them in between the center of the petals and in places where you didn't pop up the petals. And as many as you think. I mean, you don't need to get crazy with the dimensionals. Okay. So then we'll pull the papers off of our dimensionals. I'm going to shift that one over just a little bit, a little close to that center on that one. And then you can decide how you want it to be on your card. And I'm just going to place it so that I'm covering up the top of the stem. All right, there we go. Next we'll do our tag, and we're going to tie our white crinkle seam binding ribbon for our bow here. And here's a quick lesson on tying bows. When you do your first half knot, you'll notice if I create an imaginary horizontal line, one of my tails goes below that line and one goes above. So the one that's below that line, we're going to push and create a loop. And then the ones above, we're going to bring it from the top down across our loop that we just made, and then push a loop through that little hole that we created there, and then pull. And then it's just a matter of pulling the tails back and forth here and tightening it up till it's the right size and it looks the way you'd like. And then we'll bring our ribbon paper snips in and we'll trim off the tails. We'll attach that to our card with a mini glue dot. And we'll place it kind of where the hydrangea connects to the stem. Then in your kit, you have some die cut petals, and we're going to attach those with glue dots as well. And the glue dots are a little bit bigger than the center of our petals, so I'm going to just take my fingernail. I'm just going to push in between the petals so the glue dot is hidden behind our die cut petal. And then lastly, we're going to add a Rococo Rose pearls. Okay, there we go. And then if you wanted to, you could add some mossy meadow leaves to your envelope. And now I'd like to share a few more samples I made using the Hydrangea Hill suite. This first one actually might look kind of familiar, just different cardstock. And that's because this is the layout that we used for one of our cards for the class. I have to say the designer series paper in this suite kind of steals the show. And really, just the paper by itself with a greeting is just stunning. The next two cards I made using this very beautiful paper. And what's kind of cool about it is that if you cut it in half and then cut it in strips this way, you can make really lovely cards very quickly. So here's one. And then I changed the color combination just slightly and used our retiring Rococo Rose linen ribbon to accent this version. The next one features a cutout from this paper, and I only have a little tiny bit left. So let me show you what that looks like. Here's the Rococo Rose version. This is our Blushing Bride metallic ribbon from the January to June 2021 mini catalog. And then I have another version, and this uses our Seaside Spray metallic ribbon. This is retiring, it's in the annual catalog. And if I would have had enough paper, I probably could have made a Highland Heather version as well. And here's another card. Here's our coloring with our blender pens like we did for one of our cards for the class. And here's another one. I took those little tiny petals and I just made a tone on tone, so basic white on basic white, just to add a little depth and texture to that section of the card. The mercury glass acetate is just stunning, and so here's a simple card, and I cut probably a 5 1/4 by 4 inch piece and just backed my very pretty hydrangea. Here's another version using the pink mercury glass. I guess it's Rococo Rose. The background here uses the Painted Texture 3D embossing folder. And then there's that Blushing Bride metallic ribbon again. Now, the flower head here, I actually used the designer series paper and I die cut the flower head from that. And so it gives it a lot of depth and texture. And lastly, you can kind of go crazy with those little tiny petals and die cut a whole bunch of them and glue them onto your hydrangea. So I hope all of these cards help inspire you to use your Hydrangea Hill suite of products and make just a ton of lovely cards to share. Thanks again for participating in our Stampin' Class by Mail. And now, here's Gina.
Thanks for showing us how to make those beautiful cards, Brenda. Make sure to follow the link in the email that shared this video with you to access a specially curated Pinterest board with lots of ideas Brenda and I pulled together for how to use your supplies. Next month, it's my turn to show you how to stamp and assemble your cards, and I'm excited to share a sneak peek. Our 3 designs feature the well-suited suite of products from Stampin' Up, which you can find in the January to June 2021 mini catalog. One of the designs is a fun fold. From the well-suited suite, we'll be using the handsomely suited stamps, suit and tie dies, well-suited designer series paper, and the well-suited twine combo pack. If you order a kit from either Brenda or me, you'll also receive some additional elements that are cut and embossed for you. These elements use the tailored tag punch, banners pick a punch, and tasteful textile 3D embossing folder. You'll also want to order some supply items to complete the cards as shown. These include Night of Navy, Smoky Slate, and Memento Tuxedo Black ink pads, Stampin' Seal adhesive, mini glue dots, multi-purpose liquid glue, Stampin' Dimensionals, mini Stampin' Dimensionals, paper snips, a bone folder, and a variety of clear blocks. The registration deadline to guarantee your kit supplies is May 5th. We also have a bonus registration deadline of April 27th, 2021. If you register by then, you'll receive a bonus of 2 completed cards with envelopes shipped along with your kit. We also have a referral bonus if you find new friends to participate in the Stampin' Class by Mail. Check your email for details, or if you're not already on one of our email lists, reach out to either Brenda or me and we can get you added. As always, please let us know if you have any feedback about the class by mail, and until next month, happy stamping!